Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Outer Realm, the spin off show of the sister show, The Outer Realm, which airs on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from New Orleans. Today, we welcome back Luke Eastwood, and he's going to be talking about his book, just in time for Halloween, Samhain, The Roots of Halloween. And I know you guys love this stuff. I just see it all over the place, and people have been asking, when are we going to be talking about it? So we're going to be talking about it probably Halloween, of course, 'tis the season. So we're going to be doing a few things with that as we have been all month. But today, it would be the only show that we do based on Samhain itself. So without further ado, Luke Eastwood, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Good, good. Very excited. Very excited. And
Good.
I'm going to put a copy of the book up. Very excited.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did a good job with the cover. I'd love to claim credit for that, but in fairness, the publisher is responsible for that cover. But
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
beautiful. It's
isn't it?
beautiful. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can let the publisher have it, but it's everything that's inside that I'm sure is going to be the exciting part, aside from the cover. But I'm I don't think um people see Halloween and really look at the commercial side of everything. I don't think they realize how far back it goes and how deep the roots are. When you say the roots of Halloween, I mean, this goes way, way back, right?
Mm,
Right.
indeed, you're talking thousands of years. You know.
Yes. Yes. So where would you like to start with this? To me, I
Oh,
mean, we're going back 2,000 years at least. So,
I suppose you should start with what's Samhain. So it's pronounced Samhain. It's an Irish word, so you can forget about English style pronunciations in terms of how you say the letters. It's a the Irish name for the language is Gaeilge, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with English at all. It's much older language. English
yeah.
is really a young language by Europe, world standards. As European languages go, it's very young. So it's a mishmash of several different languages anyway. Whereas Irish is certainly, going back at least 2 or 3 thousand years older than English is.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yes.
very ancient language. So the way it's said is very different, and the word itself is the name for the month of November. Today, it's also the name of this ancient festival. So it's sort of that's carried on into the modern language, and then basically means November. And Halloween itself is it doesn't sound anything like it's spelt. It's uh, Hauna, Hauna. So
Yeah.
if you look at it, you'll be like, how on earth do I say this? Um, but the pronunciation is really difficult. There's lots of strange rules. Like it's the second word starts with an S, but you don't say it. You say it like an H,
Hmm.
which doesn't really make any sense because there are rules, of course, but they're really complicated, so it's quite hard to remember them all.
Yeah.
Unless you're a fluent speaker. If you've grown up speaking it, it's not a problem. It's the same with languages like Finnish or Hungarian. They're incredibly difficult, and they have all these weird rules that are hard to know unless you really know the language well.
Right. So
But
once you can get through just the pronunciation or
yeah,
the meanings, yeah.
the word "iha" means like the evening of. So it's like Halloween
Yes.
is like it's sort of short for All Hallows Eve, which is
Yes.
the night before All Hallows Day. So you have many holy days in the Roman Church, and All Hallows Day is the day after the 1st of November, and then the day after Tlachtga is, I think, All Souls Day on the
Souls Day.
2nd, I
Yeah.
think. So they're like two really important dates in the Christian calendar, which were deliberately plonked sort of more or less on top of where this ancient pagan festival of the dead.
Yes.
So you put like they like them like um, All Hallows is basically mean all holy things. So they plonked the holiest sort of day of the year right on top of the pagan festival of the dead, and
Right.
then the Souls Day is the day after. It's sort of like almost like they're trying to replace what was there with something sort of vaguely similar but different. And there's sort
Because as they took over different areas, I imagine, it was easier to get the people, right, to blend in the traditions, right, before
yeah,
they sort of pushed aside the ones that
yeah,
they really weren't interested in. Yeah.
the church is very syncretic. If you look at different countries around the world, you see how they've adapted to different places.
Yes.
Like, for instance, South America, you've got this sort of mishmash of local tradition along with Catholicism. And I saw an amazing essay about Catholicism in Native American um, reservations in Canada. And they
Mhm.
did have a picture of the Blessed Virgin with the infant, who's, that's like an Indian score with a little
Mm.
baby, and she's holding that's there. So that even like the crosses, they use the sort of an equal arm cross with
Yes.
this, some Native American patterns sort of put into it. So they're like trying to appeal to their native culture, but at the same time, subverting it in a way by trying to impose it over their real culture, but sort of like I suppose you could call it like a bastardized version of
Mm.
not really pure Christianity, and it's not their own culture either. It's sort of like a synthesis that's sort of used to sort of bring people into
Mm.
Catholicism. And they've used that technique all over the world, including Ireland a long time ago, and in Britain, and throughout the whole of Europe. They did the same in Scandinavia and
Mm.
Eastern Europe, etc.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
that's a well
very,
known
very
for doing that.
tool, because you can't really just erase people's culture that's built up over thousands of years just like that. People won't
Mhm.
accept it. So you kind of you repurpose it and adapt it, and that's basically what's happened with what is now Halloween. Is sort of a synthesis of sort of old, much older culture with a uh, sort of Christian culture
Mm. Yeah.
and too, and then a sort of demonization of the older parts of this, to make you afraid, to make you scared of these things.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, there's so much you could go through here, but I mean, so basically, the original festivals probably would have been halfway between two celestial events, which would be the equinox and
Mm.
the winter solstice. So it's between um, the autumn equinox and the winter solstice is usually around the 21st or 22nd of December, and then you've got straight after that Christmas, which is no accident that it's placed there.
Yes.
Um, so usually, actually, from an astronomical point of view, Samhain or Halloween should be the beginning of November, around about usually about somewhere the 4th or 5th. But it's got fixed at the 31st, which is, of course, the Gregorian calendar, which didn't exist before 1585. People don't realize this, that our modern calendar is only not even 500 years old yet.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
it was always that way. It wasn't. Before
Mhm.
that, Julian calendar, and then you've various other calendars from all over the world, like Persia, China. The Islamic calendar is different. I think I think the Jewish calendar was different as well, and it's just the Roman calendar has been adopted by much of the world.
Mhm.
But and the pagan calendars like they had in the one they found in Gaul, these huge bronze plates. That's sort of somewhat different again. But that
Right. Yeah.
which around this is actually marked um, on those plates, sort of 3 days around this time period at the end of October.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, about half of the plate smashed up and missing. So
Hmm.
we don't know who smashed it up, whether it was found in pieces. I forget whereabouts in France it was found, but it was reconstructed
Hmm.
and some of it's missing. And maybe it was possibly could be like Christian priests smashed it up, or maybe the Druids themselves decided to break it up because they thought it was no longer like they didn't
Yeah.
want being
But
part.
they're known for sort of keeping their history, down to like oral history, right? Like they didn't have a lot of records. It
Well,
was
they did. Well, that's the thing. That's a common myth that's been put around mostly by the Catholic Church that they
ah,
were illiterate. They
yeah,
weren't. We
yeah.
know Poles could write. We know they spoke Greek and they could write Greek. We know that they wrote down this calendar using, I think they used Greek letters for that and numbers. And we know that the Irish pagans wrote books because it's recorded in one of the Christian annals that they did
Mhm,
this. Um, Cormac MacArt, who was alive, about 200 to 250 years before St. Patrick arrived, had ordered all these books to be written down of all their knowledge.
mhm.
And it said like Patrick burnt all these books, St. Patrick. So why would you bother to burn books if they were illiterate? Well, it doesn't make any sense. There wouldn't be books if they were illiterate
That's true.
to burn. So
Mm.
that's something that's been put around that like the pagans were uneducated, illiterate. But you think about the great philosophers in like Western culture, they were all mostly pagan Greeks, you know.
Mhm, mhm. Was that so much like what the reference I was making wasn't so much that they were not able to keep proper records, but that for the most part, Druids, not so much like pagans, but I think because they held within the communities, they were the educators, they were the seers, they were like the healers, they were just revered, and a lot of their stuff was not, you know, from anything that I've read, and I'm not the expert by any means, but that it was the Druids themselves that mostly it got passed around through oral history, that there were not a lot of records from them, not
Yeah,
so much the pagans.
uh, there are some stories that mentions of Samhain going back a very long
Yeah.
time, back
Yes.
into antiquity. The settling of the manor of Tara is an Irish story which is of unknown age, but that's probably coming from quite possibly 2,000 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And that's one that's been recorded in later times. So
Mhm.
um, we don't know for sure if some of these stories were written down before the Christian monks, based on earlier documents that were then destroyed,
Mhm.
or if it was written down from oral histories. Because none of these books say where the source material came from. They might have
Mhm.
been written down in the fifth, sixth, seventh century, but
Mhm.
it doesn't say, "Oh, this is made from an earlier document." Blah
Mm.
blah. Tell when some of the later versions are made from the language, because the way the language changed over time, there'd be the oldest parts would be in Old Irish, and then sort of Middle Irish, and then moving on towards more modern. So you can kind of guess the time periods, but it doesn't actually, a lot of these books that there's no credit, there's no author.
Mhm.
So, XYZ monks that might have wrote it, they didn't put their name to it or
Mhm.
date that they completed it in most cases, etc., or where if they'd copied it from something else.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of guesswork going on about all this kind of thing. But of course, what we call Halloween. the name Samhain comes from Ireland, but um, similar festivals would have been going on all over the world in Europe and even to the other side of the world. Like the Mexican Festival of the Dead has a lot of similarities to um, Halloween
Yes.
as it was in ancient Europe.
Mm. Yes.
So, but basically, uh, the oldest references, or the oldest of definite traces of Halloween in Europe that we can be 100% sure about of are in Ireland, in a place called Athboy in County Meath, which is in the um, sort of east of Ireland, sort of a little bit northwest of Dublin. If you
Right.
know where Dublin is,
Yes.
sort of on the coast. Um, and there's a place there which today is called the Hill of Ward after the people that owned it in the 1700s onwards. But it was originally called Tlachtga, uh, named after this ancient goddess, it would
Mm-hmm.
appear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been in use as a sort of sacred site on and off for about 3,500 years ago. They were using it and lighting these sacred fires at
Wow.
this Festival of the Dead at that time.
Wow.
And come on, that whole thing of like having bonfires is a throwback to something that people were doing all this time ago.
Mm. Yes. Oop, thank you. Oh, there you're back. You froze for a minute. It's like,
Oh,
wait.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really substantial amount of time, but I mean, culturally speaking, there have been like how many sites have they uncovered, especially throughout the United Kingdom, of places with much like that. And for sure, that is what this location was, but I imagine there's so many more that they just don't know what they're looking at.
Well, the thing is, you've got thousands and thousands of sites in Ireland and also
Yes.
in the UK as well. But
Yeah.
I definitely in the UK a lot more have been destroyed.
Ah.
In even if you look at there's sort of 50, 60,000 plus rats or ring forts
Mhm.
in, in Ireland. A lot of them have been destroyed, and then there's various other sacred sites too.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot less than there used to be, but there's still an absolutely staggering number.
Mm.
Uh, I suppose the tradition here has been to leave them alone, a lot to do with superstition rather than anything else.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not
Yeah.
like people don't want to didn't want to plow up a field and use it to grow wheat or whatever,
Yeah, they're
whatever.
just taking up valuable space, I
Yeah,
guess, as well.
there was a lot of superstition around these places. So
Yes.
was can they'd be fearful of bringing bad luck upon themselves, and in
Mhm.
many cases, people had the belief that these ring forts were inhabited by the fairies or you know Alshida called or the Tuatha Dé Danann, etc. So
Mhm.
they were really reluctant to go and plow it up.
Especially through the years of, centuries of conditioning that came afterwards.
Mm,
I imagine you would be fearful of places like this because
yeah.
you should have 0 understanding. But mind you, after, the fairies would not take too kindly to plowing
Mm.
their space, I imagine. They
Well,
could be a little bit hostile, cute but hostile.
originally, it's like a ring fort would have been obviously built by human beings.
Mhm,
Some of them are like thousands of years old. Some of them are a lot more modern, would have been might only been like 1,000 years old or something like that.
mhm,
But this is tradition gone on, and they probably would have had a wooden palisade around them as a protection, like
mm,
on top of the stone.
mhm.
And you live inside them, and they keep their cattle or whatever in there.
Mhm. Yeah.
And over time, they would have just been abandoned, and sometimes there'd be sort of trees growing up in them. And some of them would have been for ceremonial purposes as well, rather than just to live in.
Mhm.
So over time, as you know, you'll probably be aware of this idea that the Tuatha De Danann sort of were once ruling Ireland, and they ended up sort of going underground, sort of. And the legend is that they went into the mountains and into the hidden places of the earth. So
Mm.
they were seen as maybe living within these rats, these ring forts, and
Mm.
they instead of people, they became like recasters of otherworldly fairy beings.
Mhm.
So whether they actually were like normal people like us once upon a time, they've got transformed, you know,
Yes.
uh, and
Yes.
you can go to places like this and you will feel the presence of strange, intangible, often invisible creatures when you go to these places where they are actually inhabited
I
by
noticed that in Scotland.
yeah,
I noticed that. You walk in any areas that were considered, where
yeah,
there were fairy circles or fairy grottos, things like that. You do feel it. But I tend to feel like that in a lot of ancient lands. I never made it up to Ireland, but I'd love to because I have heritage there. But you just how many of these ancient lands is exactly what you say.
yeah. Well,
You
it's the
do
idea.
feel that presence.
Um, these kind of spiritual creatures, if you like, sort of the worldly creatures, they don't do well in an urban environment. They don't like noise and dirt and
Mhm.
bustle and cities.
Mm.
So it would make sense if you got like an old ring fort that's overgrown, full of trees and what have you. That would be a perfect place for them to be in, where they're sort of a sort of little enclave.
Mhm.
So if they weren't there originally,
Mm.
it would be the ideal place for them to go and hang out where they won't be disturbed by people.
Which I could
So,
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you go to like an old woodlands, you'll find the same situation where they will be
Mm.
present there too.
Mhm. Um,
As time has gone and more woodlands have been chopped down, um, these sort of places like old ruined castles and ring forts and what have you, and sacred sites have, they've in some areas they might be the only places which are sort of wild, you know.
mhm. Yeah,
So
left alone, they just want to be left alone, and these are definitely the places where you don't have especially off the beaten path, but, there's so many and I always say, like, the forests, there just seem to be so much less now, I guess, in Europe and such. They're out there, but this is something that, I had spoken to an archaeologist about, and it's just like, you factor in all the thousands of years of building and population, you don't have that many great forests anymore, and that was something that when I was in Romania, I think they started, forestry and cutting down trees, like, it's one of the last great forests that has been untouched for a lot of centuries, it's just like it's sad, so they're gonna push everything out. Look what happened in Norway when they tried to put in a highway and gnomes, apparently this is all in the newspapers, gnomes stopped them, and they had to put the highway around these trees. I was like, "What?
yeah,
Gnomes?"
we've had that situation here in Ireland with it's not particularly associated with this time of year, the hawthorn, but it's
Yes.
certainly associated with the she or and our she. So, there's these spirit beings, these fairies that if you there often has been suggested that if you dig one up or kill it, you might end up dead yourself.
Wow.
So they've actually had to move a motorway to avoid this ancient hawthorn, something similar to what you're saying about in
Yeah,
Norway.
protecting, yeah, the
There's
trees, but
a lot of traditions about
yeah.
certain things that you shouldn't do.
Mm.
Uh, Taboo, or the Irish equivalent is gesh, which is
Mm.
something that you prohibited from doing, because it'll bring bad luck on yourself, or even on your family or generations of your family.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
Um,
well, it's not really, when you look at most of these things, they are linked in some way to some kind of common sense.
yeah.
You know, I see there's a question about old wives' tales. A
Oh,
lot of these things around that
yeah.
are linked with real reasons of not doing certain things. Like
Hmm.
with the hawthorn in particular, they've got these long thorns on them, which are like an inch long or so, or even longer sometimes.
Yes.
Well, the trouble with them is if you get them stuck in you, they usually, if they're there for any length of time, the chemicals that are actually in the wood cause infection.
Hmm.
And then you imagine back in the day, you got like a really nasty splinter. You might lose your hand.
Yeah.
You might even end up dead because they didn't even have, how I have gangrene and septicemia. They didn't
Yeah.
have antibiotics. Like I got a nasty infection once from a hawthorn that got stuck in my
Mm.
finger here, and I couldn't get it out for ages. And my finger started to swell up and go red, and I had to like sort of dig it out with
Mm.
like a penknife or something, and then
Yeah.
wash it out with iodine and
Mm.
whatever. But I
Yeah.
mean, if I knew that was going to be a problem if I left it. But you know, back in the day, before antiseptics, you know, you could be risking your life, if you got
Yes.
like an infection. In
Yeah. Just
fact,
factoring in the common sense side of the,
yeah,
the
so
superstition. Yeah.
there's superstitions around other trees like the elder that you should never burn that, but that was because the wood could explode. So your granny would say to you, "Oh, don't leave that wood. Don't bring that in the house." And you'd be, "Oh God, granny's being really stupid and annoying." But
Yeah.
granny knew that this particular wood was full of water in between these nodules, and if you put it on a fire, it would explode, and you get covered in boiling hot sap, and
Wow.
nasty scalded, and
Yeah.
so it
Well,
was not.
you wouldn't know that normally.
Yeah,
Average
well,
person would not necessarily know that.
originally these things were probably learnt by experience, and then they were
Mm.
passed down as traditions and sayings
Yes.
to various
Yes.
people. Like you think about all the herbs that people knew how to use. Probably back in the Stone Age, people, somebody died eating a berry, and they go, "Oh, we better make a note of that one. Don't pick that berry because that like kills
Totally.
you." So
Yeah.
they,
Make up a
it's,
story about it to avoid it.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
A
Because
lot of these things.
Michael had another question. In your research for the book, what was the most surprising information that you uncovered?
Oh, that's hard to say, really. I suppose the thing that was the most surprising was how far back the site of Tlachtga went, because you have like a burial of an infant that's sort of in the late pagan era, or maybe about 300 or 400, I think, and then it goes back a couple of thousand years in stages beyond that.
Mm.
So around um, over 3,000 odd uh, plus
Mm.
uh, BCE. So,
Hmm.
uh, and that looks like that site was reused and then built on over a massive long period, and it was still in use in the medieval times. In fact, um,
Wow.
big meeting held by the Irish when they knew that the Normans were like sort of this big threat. They'd come and then they were going to come back, and they had a big meeting about how they were going to deal with it all. It didn't make any difference to the outcome, unfortunately, but um, that was held there. And so it just was really surprising, the longevity of it, and that they actually found like remains of charcoal from fires going back that
Yeah.
far. That
Which
that
is
was
mind blowing.
um, and there must be loads of other sites all over Europe which were used in a similar way, but they're not necessarily recorded and known for that. So we can't say, oh yeah, this site here in Switzerland, say, is linked with this particular time of year and this particular festival. But we can say that about the Hill of Ward in County Meath in
Hmm.
Ireland, which is amazing that you've got this history going back so far. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the reason this is so important because I suppose life was very precious. These days, people don't die as much as they used to. Back in
Medications, technology, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, the average age now that people die at is sort of usually over 70 in most countries now, I think. And you back then in sort of yeah, you made it past 40, you were doing great, you know?
yeah, you're considered an old guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. I know.
and there
Um,
was a lot of reverence played to the ancestors, to the dead,
well,
which
I
is
mean, we,
something that has sort of disappeared a lot in the modern Halloween. You've got references to it with the imagery, because like things like skeletons and skulls and all that kind of thing are very much part of it, but the actual relationship to the past, um,
mhm.
and ancestral link is sort of kind of the context is being lost to a large extent.
Well, I think also we tend to, take life for granted, being able to switch on a furnace, being able to switch the lights on. I think people don't often think back to how hard life was back then. If you had to have candles, right? You had to have, and that was either made from what? Beeswax, lard, things of that nature. Eat, you better be out there chopping wood. And it was all about the land and it was all about the seasons. That's what sustained life. Now it's just like, put the heat on, put the light on. It was so much harder back then, and everything was revered, I think, by our ancestors. They were much smarter, I think, than what
Well,
we are now on some levels.
granted, the same way as we do now. You probably know that story, like I think it's one of Aesop's fables, the ant and the grasshopper. And
Mhm,
like the ant is beavering away collecting stuff for the winter, and the grasshopper's like, "Oh, what are you doing that for? I'm just going to enjoy the sun." And then when winter comes, of course, the grasshopper's like frozen to and like starving, and the
mhm,
ants, look, I've got all the stuff. And it was like you look at the difference between the way people live now. Back then, there was no
mhm.
um, I can't think what your supermarkets are, but like these huge supermarkets you can just drive to and you load up and
Yeah.
you turn on the heating. Like you say, if you didn't have a massive stock of firewood, if you hadn't pickled food, smoked food, put it in jars,
Mhm.
or you might slaughter some animals, you'd have
Yeah.
a supply of all the grain and you put it somewhere safe where it wouldn't rot and where the rats and mice couldn't get it.
Mhm,
If you didn't do all these things, you probably weren't going to make it through the spring.
mhm, mhm.
To
No,
die.
life was hard. But the superstitions, even going back that far, well, you're looking at this tradition, and you're looking they had a belief in renewal and they had belief in different deities and different spirits. This was the time where you were putting everything to bed, getting ready, slowly for to hunker down, I guess. And did they is this what maybe brought on some of the origins of Halloween? Is that belief that the spirits were starting to come around in the colder weather and the superstitions of, you know, walking backwards and things like that.
Well, there was very much a belief that the dead could return after
Yes.
the veil between the living and the dead, the sort of the other world, where our sort of middle realm where we live, the
Mhm.
barrier between the two became extremely thin, and it was like a two-way thing. You've got like
Yeah.
stories of people like Oshin going off to Tir na Nog in the other world, and coming back from there eventually. Um, but you've got stories of like the spirits and both the fairies and the dead uh, sort of coming through to our realm. Things like
Mm.
sort of ghostly funerals and sort of riders on horses racing across the land like you probably heard of Finn McCool and the Fianna
Yeah.
uh, bands, troops like them, coming across
Mm.
the at this sort of time. And another particular time is opposite side of the year in May, where similar kind of things happen as well. But I suppose this is the kind of famous time of year when all that kind of thing to do with the supernatural and spooky things and otherworldly creatures is like most prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of us of the lore and the creatures that are associated with this time of year obviously go back to all this. You
Mm-hmm.
know, creatures like the puka, and then you've got other things which are um, like the vampires, which are a universal thing. But like the most popular one of all, obviously, is Dracula, which comes from Ireland. That story originates here in Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
and the origins. I mean, the actual story itself is only just over 100 years old, but it goes back to a story of this kind of horrible supernatural dwarf called Avala, who had what they call bad blood, which is the Irish being Dracula. So that's
Yes.
where you get the word Dracula from. And he kind of combined that with Romanian ideas, particularly Vlad the Impaler. And you've got this fusion of Irish and Romanian tradition into this
Mm-hmm.
character.
Mm-hmm.
But vampire goes back. We don't know how old that story is. It comes from County Derry. It's from the pagan era, but we don't know exactly how old it is. And then you've got other things. I mean, from other parts of the world that have become a huge part of Halloween, such as the zombie, which
Yes. Yes.
I,
Yes. But you guys have, I mean, I think you guys can take credit for the headless horseman. Let me see if I pronounce this right. The Dullahan is an Irish tradition. Headless horseman who rides a black horse with flames shooting from his eyes, carrying his head. Sounds to me like a lot like the whole headless horseman that happens out in
yeah,
Sleepy Hollow in the U.S.
that's
Um,
right. That has come from Ireland. There's various loads of different stories about hauntings and
yeah,
uh, characters um,
the banshee.
from the Irish past, like the Killarney Lakes. There's a character, when a lord from the castle, Ross Castle, who's supposed to like fly around over the lake and you terrify people. You've got yeah, the banshee, of course, is a very famous sort of form of spirit, which is generally linked to particular families. So you see it in
Yeah.
American or European or anywhere in the world where people dress up, they might dress up as a banshee, but that is a uniquely Irish thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like the banshee is basically like a woman fairy, is what it means.
Hmm.
You know, the kind of the bit
Yeah.
at the front, means woman. So uh,
Yes. And why
it,
why tied to certain
how
families? Like, do you know,
right,
because you have the O'Neills, the O'Briens, the O'Connors, O'Grady's, Kavanaghs, 5 specific families. Like, what brought her wailing? Like, what made this attachment occur to these specific families? Any idea?
well, it's
Is
hard to know really, but I think it's more than just five. There are others that,
yeah.
uh, like I had a friend, his family was not one of those as McAteer, but they also had like a banshee when somebody died, and it's so. But then who knows? Maybe he might be linked to one of those five families in the far distant past. I can't
Mhm.
remember how it is, but um, there's an ancestral link there, which maybe the spirit is sort of tied to the family. And then anytime someone dies, then you might just, sometimes you might see the banshee, but you'll certainly hear this howl, this sort of
Mm.
like in Ireland. There's this thing called keening, which is associated with death and funerals, and like women would go and they'd moan, and you usually even get paid keeners. They'd be paid to come to the funeral and cry like very
Professional
impressed.
moaners.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So it's a little bit like that, but maybe a bit more sinister when it's not actually a human being. It's a spirit that's making this woeful.
Yeah. Wow.
And this can
Yeah.
happen anywhere, even seemingly it's tied to the person rather than the place. So you could
Mm.
be the other side of the world and say your granny in Ireland died, and you might be in Australia, and you might hear it, even though you're on the other side of the world.
Well, I
Uh,
think as people, immigrated to different parts of the world, they would bring a lot of those traditions with them and attachments. you
yeah,
know. So yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah. But
very,
a lot of
very
these things
interesting.
they've got changed over
Mhm.
time a little bit, and then you've got a strange thing of sort of the merging of different cultures as well, where things that were, say, just in the New World, as it was once called, um, they've ended up being exported to all the Americas or to
Mhm.
Australia or somewhere, and then they've been come back to Europe again, slightly
Mhm.
different, you know.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the whole thing with the pumpkin, that was
Yes.
a turnip, and I don't know if you've ever tried to carve a turnip.
It's
It's
hard. No, I can't even cut one to eat. No.
Yeah, well, you're as likely to cut yourself as to cut the turnip because they're so hard, you know.
Yeah.
You like cutting away for hours. Um,
Yeah.
but they were lanterns. That was
Mm.
sorry, I just had to cough there a second.
No,
Uh,
that's okay. Yeah.
they I'll just have a sip of water. They were lanterns,
Mhm.
and that had a specific purpose.
Mhm.
Obviously, the purpose of the light was to attract the spirits of your ancestors, but for safety's sake, you put it inside something. And a lot
Mhm.
of people, they wouldn't have like a cups, pots, or like they wouldn't have things to spare. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, I remember meeting an old guy years ago. I was doing some work on an orchard, and this old guy lived next door. I went in his house, and it was like a pretty old house. He had one chair in the kitchen, and a small table, one knife, one fork, one spoon, one plate, one cup, and he had like a sharp knife that had been once this long, was worn down. It was only that long. He'd sharpened it
Wow.
time. So people used to live simply. You didn't have like a fancy candle holder or something.
Mhm.
So you'd cut something out of turnips, and that tradition carried on because you're not going to use your one and only cup to put
No.
the window, but you
No.
you cover a turnip, and then that obviously it's much easier to use a pumpkin.
Right. But
No,
wasn't the whole turnip thing wasn't that just to ward off the devil sort of thing? So like for
no,
them it wasn't just like
maybe,
a
maybe
decoration thing, it was to push away like the fears of evil spirits and such, right?
I think that's a much later interpretation of that. Originally, that would have been there to call your ancestors to you,
Okay.
and then obviously the church actually did many things to try to stamp out a lot of it, especially associated with sort of divination and prophecy, that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
um, because they said, "Oh, it's satanic. This is all satanic," and they like again with the light, they say, "Oh, you could use the light to ward off the devil," whereas originally it would have been to attract the spirits of your ancestors, and
Yes.
you would have left food for them.
Mhm.
You would leave out food for your ancestors, which you would not eat. It was a tradition. If you ate that food left for them, then you kind of disgraced yourself, and that would mean that when you're dead, no, you wouldn't be able to avail of the food
Mm-hmm.
left to you
So that was
because
a big deal as well, leaving food for your ancestors, because, like you say, many people didn't have the luxury of having extras.
yeah, well, you wouldn't leave like a masses. You'd like say a
Well,
plate, an
yeah.
extra plate of food,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
then would probably end up being eaten by birds or something like that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't eat it yourself. That
Right.
that would be considered disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, you still have countries where veneration of ancestors is still a big thing. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
it's just something that's sort of more or less it has sort of disappeared in Europe to a large extent. But
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the folk memory that's still there.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Uh,
lots of traditions around this time. There's a very strange thing which is moved a little bit later to St. Martin's Day in November, which is only really done by old people. They would get a chicken and slaughter it and scatter the blood on the four walls of the house,
oh.
outside the house, as like a protection, a blessing, you know?
Hmm.
So originally that would have been like an animal sacrifice done to appease the gods, probably,
Yeah.
and the house, but then it got changed to like it was called bleeding for St. Martin. So you using the blood of a chicken. It just doesn't sound very Christian at all, does it?
No, it does. It sounds pretty pagan. Yeah.
Yeah. But it got somehow attached to St. Martin and his holy day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You
So you
also
can
had the
think,
tradition of the Irish fruitcake with the coins and the buttons and
oh,
rings for fortune telling. That was a cool
the
one.
bomb track. Yeah. There was a
Yeah.
thing that if you got the ring, I almost swallowed one of them once,
Oh.
because it's a little ring in it. And if you got the ring, that meant you were going to get married. And even today, they make these bomb bracks with a ring inside for you to find. If you get the slice with the ring in, you got. Uh,
Yeah.
it was really, really popular that people wanted to know things like, were they going to get rich? Were they going to get married? Um, you
I
know,
guess
uh,
that's where the coin comes in. If you got the coin, it would be upcoming wealth, right?
yeah, that's less common. I think the ring was the most common thing in that is put inside the cakes.
Yes.
But yeah, a lot of people wanted to know, and there's loads of different ways of divination. People used to do strange things like putting nuts onto the fire and watching them, you know, um, jump off, and you could sort of tell your fortune from this kind of thing. There's lots of really weird games like the apple. Do they still have apple
Bobbing
bobbing?
for apples. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll do
No,
that.
that's only one of many Apple games there used to be. Some of them were really quite dangerous. Like one was you'd have like an apple on a string with a candle in it, a lit candle, and it would be swinging around, and then you'd have to try and catch it in your
Oh.
mouth. But you could easily get covered in wax or burn yourself.
Oh,
You
jeez.
know, that kind of stuff's kind of gone now because
The ancestors were
it's
fearless.
dangerous. You
Yeah. Oh, gives a whole new meaning to the word shenanigans, that's for sure.
know?
So, and you guys up in the northern part of Ireland, the Bank of Foyle, um, the largest, and I don't know if it's still the same, since we had lockdown, but it had the largest Halloween carnival, literally, like in Ireland, big parades and haunted house experiences, and is that even still a thing? That's up in Londonderry, Londonderry.
Um, there's quite a few places that do these things now
Wow.
around the country, and there's celebrations up in um, various places. I think there's Drogheda, there's one. I think then in Athboy, the Puka Festival, and there Ishnock as well. There's another. They're doing stuff for Halloween now. It's
Mm.
become a really big thing again, and um, there've always been Halloween fires.
Yeah.
Uh, where people would have like their own homemade bonfire, and
Mm-hmm.
but that kind of changed up in the north
Mm.
because of uh, something that happened a long time ago was called the gunpowder plot. And on the 5th of November, this Guy Fawkes, or Guido Fawkes, his name was, he's known as Guy, he tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament, and they moved the bonfire to the 5th of November in Britain. And of course, because of the associations with, the six counties are still part of the United Kingdom, they would have their celebration then. And
Mm-hmm.
then what used to happen was an effigy of this Guido Fawkes, or the guy, was made and burnt on the fire. And then in sort of he also ended up, because of this split between Catholicism and Protestantism, in the north it was often an effigy of the Pope that was burned. But that's sort of gone out, that's sort of changed now. I think those sort of habits have died down, because like the sort of enmity between Protestants and Catholics is sort of pretty much um, it's reduced to like a very kind of uh, very small extent now, whereas it was like very, very severe, a few decades ago.
Oh, even over into the New World, it carried
Yeah.
over.
So have these big fires, and sometimes there might, we don't know about the ancient past whether there were actual effigies, or even suggested that even animals were burned on the fire in the past.
Mm.
Uh, but in Ireland it's still like the 31st, but up in Northern Ireland it could well be on the 5th of November, because of this gunpowder plot
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
was, I think that was something like 1605 or something, uh,
Wow.
around that time.
Yeah.
So it's quite a long time ago.
That goes back, doesn't it?
But the whole bonfire thing, you'll find that all up throughout all the Irish festivals, the 8 major festivals, but you'll also find they're very important throughout sort of the ancient world. Not just in Europe, but in sort of, North Africa, Asia. Uh, I'd imagine probably in the Americas too, but we don't know that much about what
Mm.
people have done like 1,000 years or plus ago in
Mm-hmm.
America, from, I suppose, Native American stories and their sort of folk memories. But then again, they wouldn't have recorded how far back it goes. It's just something that their forefathers did.
Mm.
So it's really hard to know how old a lot of these traditions are in different places.
I think they traveled. I mean, there are symbols and structures that come from, they have, the
Mm.
Celtic symbols and stuff that have been found in
Oh,
like
yeah.
northern United States. So they must have come in across the top, or just, sailed over, really.
That's the
Um,
voyage of St. Brendan. And there was some Welsh prince that apparently went to North America. There's a stone there. I forget the name of that now. That's been found that has like writing on it that was like in Old Welsh or
well,
something. There's
well,
actual
there's
of
been
that
stuff
kind
like,
of thing there.
yeah. Well, I mean, the Vikings were here,
Mm,
early on. You had they did come in from Scotland. You had Prince Harry Sinclair, but I mean, they have in Lake Michigan a Stonehenge circle with
mm,
like tall stones that resembles a lot of the henges that you see, in the UK, that like all of, Ireland, Scotland, England, and it's underwater now. So that, and they have next to a stone with an image of a mastodon. So that puts it pre-ice age. So
yeah, yeah,
how far back were they coming over in some of those traditions with them even back then?
yeah. And people think about Europe, but we know that the Chinese they actually circumnavigated the world
Yes.
before the Europeans did.
Yes.
And you got like Polynesian people, sort of colonizing places, coming from sort of Central Asia, South Central Asia, going across into New Zealand, Australia, thousands of years ago. Like they
Mm-hmm.
reckon that began about 5,000 years ago, possibly. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
so I think, like you say, the traveling has been a lot longer than people think. You know, you tend to think of like sort of, I don't know, early Renaissance. You know, people going out in these sort of European style ships, but
Mm.
you know, it was definitely a lot earlier than that. You know, I
I
mean, there's a lot
agree.
of controversial um, opinions and evidence is quite often dismissed as rubbish.
Mm.
The stuff that's apparently in the crypts of the Smithsonian that prove that
Mm-hmm.
ancient migrated. But I mean, if that's never allowed to see the light of day, then you can never really prove that this is true. You can just speculate because there's sites in different parts of the world
Mm-hmm.
closed off to the public. You're just not allowed to go and see what's there.
You were not. You were not. And often under the control, of governments. I understand there's some sites that you have to protect,
Mm,
because you start bringing in the masses, a lot of structures have sustained damage with everybody just touching and picture taking and things like that. I've traveled many places. It's like, don't take out that camera. I'm like, mm.
yeah.
So,
Well, that's
okay.
understandable where, like, say, flash photography might damage like a cave painting or something.
Yes,
But
yes.
you
You
know,
know,
in cases like there's controversy around like the Grand Canyon. I mean, someone probably took photographs of these things that are hidden away. But
that's
you
right.
can't even photographs. They're censored as well. So
Well, it's
um,
under the control of NASA. One of these cages where there's allegedly a Buddha was found along with some Egyptian carvings and artifacts, and you will be met. People have been met with armed guards.
yeah,
So it
I've
kind of
heard
makes you wonder what's in the
that
Grand Canyon. What was it really?
people have been arrested for trying to go and visit some of these caverns.
Yes,
And they
yes,
just won't let you go. So that
yeah.
all seems a bit suspicious. But I think that it's a theme that I've often kind of thought about,
Mm-hmm,
and I've got a bit in some of my writing is sort of this desire to sort of push a narrative about the past
mm-hmm,
um, that's sort of acceptable but not true. I mean, if you look at like the whole Halloween thing, so much of what was actually quite sort of normal and benign practices was demonized by the church as sort of evil and whatever. And now we with greater understanding of the subject can say, oh
mm-hmm,
yeah, that's what this was, and it wasn't like
mm-hmm,
devil. It was just a harmless tradition. But for centuries, people would have believed that certain things that that the fairies are evil, and you should go out with an iron pin in your lapel to protect yourself from the Sidhe because they don't like iron apparently. And a lot of people were lived in terror. They had terrible fear that their children would be taken by the fairies and replaced with a
But
changed.
yet they all coexisted before the church, right?
Yeah, they would seem to have existed a lot more peacefully and would have been a
Yeah.
lot more uh, benevolent relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
then the church that changed to much more of a relationship of fear.
Mm.
And,
Which
and
is which is normal. It's still that
people
way.
people used to do things like try to protect their milk, try to protect their cows, their crops from not just um, the good people or the Sidhe, the fairies, whatever names you want to call them.
Mm.
Um, they'd also be worried about the devil, and they'd also be worried about witches cursing them. So your milk could be turned sour by by the fairies, by the devil, or by a witch's curse. You know,
Mhm.
you have all your milk you've got, which is you're going to make some cheese, and then it's all gone rancid, and then you've got no cheese, and you'll be, oh, you know,
That's it.
you might think that they're a neighbor's
Cursed.
you put a pashog on you or something, or some evil witch, or the devil has got it in for you, or you could say, oh, I upset the fairies last week by
Yeah.
I I accidentally hacked a branch off a hawthorn, and now I've got to pay for it, and so there were a lot of superstitions that have sprung up later on, which were very much sort of encouraged by church, and they
Mm.
tried to ban a lot of the traditions around Halloween.
Mm.
Because it was supposed to be this religious festival for Catholicism, but people still carried on doing all the traditions that existed before, a long time before, and
Mm.
try as they might, they've been unable to stamp them out.
Hmm. Yes. Well, I
Managed
mean,
to
this.
make it fearful. They did
Yeah.
manage to change a lot of the lore and sort of the practices somehow by sort of instilling fear in people.
Hmm. Nothing's changed. There's still a lot of that. There's still a lot of that.
Yeah.
um, I'm just trying to get to a question. Heidi had asked the celebration of Day of the Dead. How does that fit in with Halloween?
Well, I assume she means the Mexican Day of the Dead, but that's very similar. The ancestral
Yeah.
thing. If you look at Mexican graveyards and their tombs, they're often very complex and ornate, and they have great respect for their dead.
Hmm.
And that's a very similar uh, to how it would have been here. People had a great reverence for the dead, and
Hmm.
um, this sort of having a special day to revere the ancestors and leaving offerings and things like that. Like nowadays, it's like bringing things like flowers to the grave and etc. That's very
Yes.
similar. So although
Well,
it's on
because
the
it's right, like as of midnight, right? I think it's a midnight on October 31st. So it's November 1st. I think they're sort of crossing into one another.
yeah, well, when you think about the ancient Celtic calendar, the way the day started was actually when the sun went down at night.
Hmm.
Night preceded day. So a day starting actually started at sunset and sort of would end again at sunset. It's
Hmm.
like not now where the day begins in the morning when you wake up and it ends sort of like when you go to bed pretty much and then you wake up again it's morning. It didn't work like that. Back then it was uh, you had two halves of the year, winter and summer, really, basically.
Mm.
Um, but so you're saying this thing starting in the night time, that's sort of similar in a way where uh, you could say not everyone believes this, but a lot of people would say that Samhain or Halloween is the beginning of the Celtic year, sort of like the beginning and end,
Hmm.
because the beginning of winter, it means of summer's end. That's what Samhain means.
Hmm.
Like from a lot of modern pagans, they celebrate Halloween or Samhain as the Celtic New Year, if you like.
Hmm.
So, so the beginning of the darkness is like the beginning of the year, just like it would be the beginning of the day.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So they didn't really, wasn't so much about the seasons as much as it was about the hot and the cold, right? Like renewal and
You don't
ending.
here. You've got like warm rain or cold rain, pretty much.
Yes. It's true. It's true. I've been caught in that
It's
rain out there.
sort of a almost illusory thing. Every year we're hoping for this. Actually, this year's been exceptional. We've had a great summer, but most years it's sort of like 4 days of rain, one day of sun, and then 3 more days of rain, maybe two, and another 6 days of
Colder
rain.
rain.
And
Yeah.
so we don't really have like summer in the way that a lot of countries envisage it, where you might get 2 whole months or more of sun
Hmm.
with no rain. That never happens here, really. Pretty much, it's very very unusual to get like say a whole month where it didn't rain. That's
Hmm.
really so. Our concept of summer is quite different from say like if you lived in Greece or something, you know.
Yes. Yes. No, I've been down there. No rain at all. The whole time I was there. I come up to the
You're
UK.
hoping for a bit of rain, and we're sitting here hoping for some sun.
Yeah. Oh man, I got rain everywhere. Then I flew to France and I'm like, okay, I won't have rain here. I got poured on. I'm like, I brought the rain with me from Scotland. I could not get away with it, not at all. And I mean lots of rain. You guys get lots of rain.
Oh
It's-
yeah, we certainly do because I mean all that weather systems coming off the Atlantic, and the first place
yeah.
they hit is Ireland.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes. You guys kind of buffer it for the for Scotland and then and downward. I was in northern Scotland. I got nailed. I'm like, oh my
yeah,
God. But that
yeah.
it's so
These storms they come up and they will hit like the southwest and they go up the side of Ireland and they go across to Scotland and then they carry on to Scandinavia. But usually by the time they get to Norway and Sweden, they kind of burnt out
phased
by then.
out.
Yeah, there's
Oh
not much
gosh.
left.
So you can imagine the ancient people having to, you know, to that's essentially what they had to work with. That's too much water for crops. Not a really good idea
Yeah.
either, So, I mean, I imagine it would have been just very challenging.
Well, people knew where they could grow things and where they couldn't. You know, they
Yeah.
weren't they'd obviously by trial and error you'd realize you can't grow wheat in a bog. You
Hmm.
know, you,
Yeah.
areas that were like not suitable for growing plants, you might keep goats and sheep and
Mm.
cattle, which is still the same today to a large extent, where
Mhm.
land that's good for growing crops, that's
Yeah.
generally be further inland, so on the east coast, that's where you get the most sun, and it would have
Mm.
been the same back in ancient times, and um,
Yeah.
people were very respectful of the cycles, and they would, try to honor the gods, and they'd make offerings to the gods, really, because a year, a bad year, or a couple of bad years could be like total disaster. I mean,
Mhm.
even modern times, you look at the 1840s, what happened here
Mhm.
with reliance on the potato,
Mhm.
and like that was just absolutely catastrophic.
Mm. Yes, I can
There's
imagine.
times in the past where obviously that was an unnatural situation where everyone was relying on potatoes, but you could
Mhm.
have there would have been famines in earlier times where um, just terrible weather would obliterate
Yeah.
all the crops pretty much. And there've been terrible events in the past, like volcanic eruptions that have thrust entire countries and even continents into darkness, more or less, for a year or two.
Mhm. Yeah,
Krakatoa was the major ones that caused famines across the world because all the ash from that volcano blanked out the
yeah.
sun in a lot of places. So you had huge crop failures for like a couple of years afterwards because of that.
Mhm.
So people they would like think, well, if I don't venerate the gods, then they might punish me and I'll have like no food and I'll die, or my cattle will die. And of course, you're so linked to the land and to the animals, if your crops die and your animals die, then that means you die as well.
Mhm.
I
Well,
guess
countries all over, I think the ancient world would do sacrifices at this time of year before crops and, the human sacrifices just to guarantee having good crops for the upcoming season.
a long time ago they would have definitely done that. And, we're talking thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's something that became more and more frowned upon as time passed. But yeah, it would have been a universal thing all over the world at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Not every single culture, but in a lot of cultures all over the world, it was common and acceptable to sacrifice people, and in some cases, people actually volunteered to be sacrificed because
Mm-hmm.
it would have been seen differently. It wouldn't been seen as like a punishment necessarily
Would have
in
been revered.
cultures such as here and in like Scandinavia. It would might have been considered actually an honor to sacrifice yourself to the gods,
Mm-hmm. Well, the
right?
maidens, especially, right?
Yeah, like it'd be more like a privilege than a punishment.
Yes.
People would willingly, you know, be sacrificed,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is very odd to the modern mindset. But people
A lo-
sort of very different, and they didn't have this concept of eternal damnation, you
Mhm.
know, that we have now. So
But we have
you would,
the conditioning is different now.
yeah, we for quite some long time,
Mhm.
we've been exposed to Christianity.
Mm.
It's just really about teaching about Jesus. There's this sort of terrible fear that's put into people, fear that
Mm.
if you don't live a good life, that you're going to burn in hell for all eternity and be tortured by Satan forevermore.
Mhm.
So, I think that actually has made a lot of people fearful of dying.
Mm.
Whereas your belief in afterlife is not associated with like a possibility of burning in hell, then it seems a lot less traumatic, a lot less of a worry to know that you're going to die.
Mhm. No, I agree. I agree. I mean, I think there are people who are, in ancient times, this would have been things they were groomed for as well. So a lot of that fear would have been taken away as they would have been groomed for a sacrificial position. I mean, at least you look in the Americas, you know,
Mm.
there was a lot of that. I mean, without even another thought, like you say, yeah, okay, I'm up. That's
Yeah,
it. All right.
and
Um,
some other religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, their attitude to death is very different from the sort of
yes,
Christian fear of death.
yes, yeah. It's a next transition. That's how I
Mm.
try to look at it. It's just the next level. We transition, leave leave the earthly prison. Off
Yeah.
we go. Hopefully.
Well, they
Um,
believe in reincarnation. Certainly, the Buddhists and Hindus do, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that ancient Celtic peoples also believed in this
mhm,
transmigration of souls, and that you could come back as another human or another creature, or even like as a tree or something.
mhm,
So this kind of fear of dying wasn't the same at all. You
mhm.
know, I mean, there have been various beliefs in the pagan past that, like the Egyptians' belief that you could be obliterated.
Mm.
Um, there was this, when you went to the afterlife, you would be judged by Thoth, and you'd be on the scales, your heart on one side, and this feather, white
Yes.
feather. And if your heart was too heavy, I forget the name of this creature, like I think he was half crocodile, half baboon, and he'd obliterate your soul if you've been bad. If you had lived a bad life, you'd be decimated.
Mm.
So in that particular case, the Egyptians, they were worried about
Yeah.
death if they lived a bad life.
Mhm.
I think that maybe some of the Christian view of that is sort of echoing that Egyptian belief, because you could see a huge influence of Hermeticism on European culture and Christian culture, actually. So
Mhm.
uh,
Yes.
I think maybe some of these people, certainly in the back, and they would have been well aware of Egyptian mythology, and maybe they ran with that and sort of put a new
Mm.
twist on it. And you've got all these medieval images of hell to terrify people, like Hieronymus Bosch's paintings and such like.
Mm.
Perhaps
Mm.
they used to literally go around sort of during the plague days with these paintings of that to terrify the public and going repent and you do this and do that, because obviously if you thought, right, I might get the plague, and then, oh, this is where I'm going if if I um
Hmm.
if I
A lot of
misbehave.
conversions happening.
Yeah,
Right.
suddenly all these people got religion and started donating money to the church because
Hmm.
they're terrified that they're going to be obliterated by Satan with a pitchfork and fiery
Yeah.
brimstone, all that. I
Repenting
mean,
everywhere.
there's always been
Yeah.
some manipulation in religion. I'm not going to say that the pagan religions were really any different. I'm sure there were manipulators and
Mm.
sort of the level of control in ancient religions as well. But I think the Catholic Church took it to new heights, though.
Mm.
Um, in a way that was never really been seen before, not to
Hmm.
the extent.
Yeah. Well, it
But
had a long reach. It still does. It's
yeah,
surpassed time on different levels. I mean, they are a corporation, their own country, the
but they have
Catholics.
an incredible archive, which they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
I mean, probably not even like 10% of what's in the Vatican has ever been seen by the public.
But they've got what, like 20 miles
Mm.
or kilometers? I don't know, 50 kilometers worth of. Yeah, I heard it was just extravagant. But I mean, you have to, I would think as well, some of the ancient texts. I mean, there's nobody around even to decipher any of that. Even AI is programmed by somebody. So how
Yeah,
do you translate some of this? How do you decipher some of these symbols? How do you translate the language? I mean, we may never know what's in there for
some
that
of the
reason as well.
some of them they're starting to get AI to look at them, the public stuff. But there's texts supposedly from all kinds of cultures
Yeah.
and artifacts, going back thousands of years, which
Mm.
they've catalogued, they know what they've got, but the rest of the world doesn't know.
Mm. Well,
But
it's a suppressed history.
so there could be all kinds of things from ancient Ireland, from say from the Vikings, from the Native Americans, from the
Mm.
Aborigines in Australia, from all over the world that are
Hmm.
sitting in the Vatican vault that
Hmm.
could be really useful and vital for understanding the ancient past. But unless things change dramatically, we're never ever going to see it or
Hmm.
ever. And they're not going to let historians and archaeologists look at it. You know,
It
they've
would be, it would
archived stuff, and it's just sitting there like gathering dust, basically.
well, if it goes against the narrative, we'll never know what it is. But it would be nice if even they could open up a museum somewhere, even a small one, and just rotate some of the
Yeah.
what
Well, there
they might consider inconsequential, but the rest of us might kind of go, wow, having more knowledge or being more open-minded to some of the history that was really out there.
there is a museum there which you can go and see. You can
Yes.
visit, but it's like the bit that you're allowed to go in is like a 100th of, or even a thousandth of what they've actually got. So you
Hmm.
can go and visit. If you go to the Vatican, you can go and visit the Vatican Museum and see some of it, but it's a tiny
Hmm.
piece of what they've got. The
Yeah.
rest of it is very carefully kept under lock and key, and yeah, the likes of us will never be allowed to even
No.
get within 100 meters of it.
Well,
That'll
we know
change
that won't happen. you
it
know.
when they decide to open up all their archives and let all the historians and archaeologists of the world go and look at it all. And actually, there may be things about you know all the countries and cultures of the world that we currently don't know that we could discover and understand so much better. Because I
Hmm.
mean, the Vatican's been around sort of as a sort of Christian church for about 1700 years, but a
Hmm.
lot of what they've collected is going back way, way beyond that. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm. Well, even ancient technologies. I mean, they have their hands on everything. I mean, they had the Romans. Romans had a very far and wide reach. They got into many different countries and took the best of the best, and
Yeah,
off it went. So,
like
all of these countries, like look, like Ireland being one of these old countries, you guys have lost a lot.
yeah. Well, you look at like a lot of Eastern Europe where their ancient paganism has more or less disappeared. They would have
Yes.
had same kind of festivals around this time of year, but so much of that, their artifacts and their symbols and their effigies of the gods were all taken away
Hmm.
by the church and
Hmm.
either put into the museum or they were just destroyed.
Hmm.
So in all these places that they colonized, they did take stuff for their
Hmm.
museum. They took a lot of stuff. They um, and then the stuff they thought was the most interesting or the most sort of best examples, they keep them, and
Hmm.
then they destroy the rest.
Well,
So they
because once you get versed in something, you're looking at something they may not understand when they first come across it. But like you say, they find it interesting to think, well, what is the relevance of this? What does it mean? What can we do with it? How can we make it our own? Like they'll hold on to it till they can figure it out.
Yeah, well, see, I think a lot of places, certainly you see that in Ireland, in Britain, across the whole of Europe, there's a sense of loss that people have lost their ancient culture and their
Mm,
belief systems that they had. And there's a real interest in like reclaiming that and rediscovering that, which is
mhm,
probably one of the reasons why, you know, Halloween and Samhain's become a lot more popular, apart from the sort of the commercial pop aspect of it,
mm.
which is a bit of fun.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people they do understand that this comes from a time before modernity, and a
Hmm.
lot of people know why what happened, not what this stuff's all about, where it comes from, because um, yeah, as you're saying, that all this, a lot of the texts are locked away somewhere, or effigies or artifacts that are associated with uh, this festival and similar ones are just buried away in a vault somewhere in a museum or in like the Vatican.
Hmm.
So it does take a lot of time and effort for people to sort of piece together the story of where all this came from and what it actually meant, what it was about.
Hmm.
Uh, Lots of people doing that now. So
Hmm.
I think really, I'd say in the last 30 years, it's really changed, especially since the internet. This whole kind of rediscovery of humanity's sort of lost culture has really taken off. Partly because it's easy to get access to research materials, but also, as people like talk and they find out about things and they go, "Oh, did you know this? Did you know that?" And people can share information, like, for instance, like say, well, where the bonfires came from.
Hmm.
That's something you can encapsulate in like a short few paragraphs or whatever, and a few pictures, and you can literally tell thousands of people about that now. Whereas back in the day, you'd be in some dusty old book. There's all these books that I've read and used for research, which, written from like the 600s through to sort of like, the 18 and 1900s, which no one ever reads. They just sit there and they may have been read at the time, but then they just get forgotten about, end up in a library. And
Hmm.
there's
Yeah.
so much information about them. But then now people like me or other people, they can read that, write something about it, put it on Facebook or make a little YouTube video. And then, suddenly thousands of people know that thing that was in a book that no one read for 100 years, you
Hmm.
know, some academic read. So
Yeah.
it's totally changed. It's opened up the whole field of sort of understanding
Hmm.
understanding the past of different countries.
Hmm.
Even through all these times when things have been happening, they have been in many cases written down by people to preserve this stuff. But the most people don't know that this stuff exists. That there's all these books that people wrote, like the last century, the one before that, going back, hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years even.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, people can't. Before, you'd have to say get on a train or get a plane, go to some huge library in like Washington or in London or wherever, or Dublin, or
Mm-hmm.
now you do that, you know.
That's right here,
Yeah,
right
you
at
can
your
go
fingertips
all
now.
online.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It is amazing. But that's that's evolution. I guess we just see where it goes from here. But
Yeah.
so um tell everybody what you've got coming up and where to pick the book. I do have a link, the Amazon link in the show description to get the book. I'm not sure if they can get it through your website or if you've got another book coming up or an event, anything you want to share.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be giving a talk in a place called Sneem at the International Storytelling Festival. I'll be signing books there and telling a few ghost stories. And I also produce a magazine called Pagan Island, which
Oh.
there's one just out, which is, I'll show you that. That's this. And there'll be another one coming out in December
Hmm.
for solstice. And I'm
Is there a link to that on your website,
book
Luke?
next year as well. Yeah, the website for that is just paganisland.com. And that's the name of the magazine.
Can they link it from your website as well? To
I don't think I have a link for it on my own
Okay, so
website.
paganisland.com. I will put that
Uh,
in.
and there's all different types of articles about modern practice and the past, and art
Hmm.
and poetry and stuff like that in there too. And I'm thinking I'm going to bring out uh, a very different book next year. I um, I wrote a sci-fi,
Ooh.
and I'm thinking of possibly bringing it out myself next year. I
Oh.
haven't made a 100% decision because I'm working on another book, which is sort of kind of top secret at the moment. I don't want to say
Ah.
about it,
Of
but
course it is.
that will maybe take me a while to finish that. So I know I finished this sci-fi, so I'm thinking maybe I'll put that out.
Well,
Uh,
hopefully you'll keep in touch with that and come
yeah.
back and tell us all about it. So,
Well, it's kind of very. I think I wrote it a while ago, but it's very much kind of topical for these times. It's very much
yes.
about the dystopia, about control and surveillance and
Hmm.
sort of
Right.
narrative, and it's also about the supernatural as well, because this guy has a near-death experience,
Hmm.
and up his whole life is completely transformed. And I suppose that's the main story there. I'm not going to tell you any more about it because I won't.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to let us know when you're ready to talk about
Uh,
that. And
that's an interesting thing because near-death experiences is something that have been going on for thousands of years, of course,
yes.
even recorded by the ancient Egyptians and up to modern day, where people wake up, and they've been in a coma and they've got all this stuff to tell people.
Yes.
That's been going on for thousands of years,
Yes.
uh,
It's
and again,
fantastic.
that ties in like with death and the other world, and just like
Yeah.
all this Halloween stuff does. So
Yeah.
I think there's so much that people are now communicating about, which were sort of taboo subjects for a long time. That
Hmm.
you know, like back in Catholic Ireland, if you had been someone who had that weird experience and you thought you'd seen like your dead relatives while you were asleep, or you met God or something, or you even cases people think they went to hell and come back and they woke up.
Hmm.
You probably might risk ending up in a mental hospital if you told too many people about that. Such
Hmm.
things dismissed as insanity, or whereas now I think people are a lot more open-minded about that kind of thing.
And I think a lot of it is again thanks to technology and be able to talk about it and reach out with other people who have experienced it. You don't feel so alone. If other people are talking about it, then you feel like they're not just with that, but with anything that's within high strangeness. I mean, I grew up saying we don't talk about that. It's a family secret. What?
Yeah,
It's not normal, but now, I mean,
yeah,
look at us now. Here we are having a talk about high strangeness and DEs. And I think it's opened a lot of doors.
yeah. Well, that's good. I think that's a really good thing. I think, when you hide things, it offers an opportunity for things to fester. It's very unhealthy. I'm not saying you should, wash all your dirty linen in public, that
Mm-hmm.
you should body everything. But, you know, when you look at situations when there's some censorship and people can't talk about any of their problems, it tends to create multi-generational problems, I
Mm-hmm.
think, where
Mm-hmm.
things are subjects and it's just all swept under the carpet. It's, these things come back to bite you. I mean, you
Well,
would
it
look at,
becomes a generational thing after that,
yeah,
right?
you look in Ireland, the abuse scandals in the church, how that has been suppressed for so long, and then suddenly it all came out in this huge splurge.
Mm-hmm.
And the repercussions that are still playing out even now. But that was a really cathartic thing for people to actually better come forward and say, this happened to me, this happened to my sister, or to my brother, or to my father, or my mother, etc. Um, Whereas, at one point, you really literally couldn't even mention these things at all.
A Taurus girl says, Luke, you should have a podcast. You're talking, have lots of insightful information. Well, you do have a YouTube channel. You want to spit that out?
Yeah, I don't really have a podcast as such. I do have a YouTube,
Yeah,
and I do my own like monologues, and then I do interview other people as well
okay,
periodically.
right.
So I try to cover a lot of different subjects because I'm interested in lots of different things.
Yes,
So I'm kind of divided up my YouTube into these playlists of like
right.
different areas to
So
make it a
people
bit,
can find your YouTube and they can go and hear more of your conversations
yeah,
and your
or my
thoughts.
my
Oh, we
my
go.
even.
Well, everybody, I appreciate you all coming into the chat and hanging out with Luke and myself today. It's been very insightful. And tomorrow night on the Outer Realm, we've got Preston Dennett, Dolly Saffron, who's going to be having an out of this world discussion on Preston's book, Not From Around Here. He's got a complete chapter that's basically reserved for stories of UFOs and ET graveyard encounters. Yes, this happens. So we're going to talk about that. Thursday night open discussion. Wayne Mallows returns for October bonus open discussion, exploring the age old obsession with spirit communications, looking outside the realm of normal for answers. And we'll get into Victorian stuff and just really ancient stuff and stories. And you know me, I love ancient stuff. So we're going to talk about all of that. So you have been listening to Beyond the Outer Realm with myself, Michelle DeRoche, and my very special guest, Luke Eastwood. We have been on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We will see you all tomorrow evening. Thank you all for tuning in. Good night for Luke and good afternoon for me. Bye bye.